I'd like to show you what we did to put the dry fire gun assembly on a red gun. So I started down here by the trigger and I drilled 2 1/8-inch holes that were separated a little bit. So drilling the 2 holes, and then I just used the side of the drill and augured out between the extra material in between and made a long slot. So that was how simple this is to do. Then the next thing that you need to do is you need to get a piece of metal somewhere on this red gun so that you can hang our trigger switch gun assembly, which has the large magnet. And I did that right here on the bottom. There's a convenient place. I simply went down to Home Depot and found a piece of metal. It was actually a bracket. It didn't bother me that there were a couple of holes in it, and I simply epoxied that to the base of this red gun. And the final thing then that's necessary to do is to be able to get the laser in the muzzle of the gun. So as I move that down here, you can see that we have a hole drilled in the center of the muzzle, and I, in this case, was not able to drill this by hand because a short distance underneath the outer plastic there is a metal rod that comes up here inside the barrel, and that metal rod was too hard for me with a hand drill to be able to drill into it. I took it over to my favorite machinist and I asked him to bore these holes. He drilled about 1 inch down into the muzzle, and he did that by fixturing the gun, and he held the gun very solidly and ran an end mill with a drill bit into the end and had no problems being able to drill into that. Now the final thing that we need to do is to be able to get the 1/4 inch shaft that we're going to need to put the dry fire laser on. So I'm going to show you that this is what we're going to end up putting into the muzzle. It's a modified part of our normal barrel anchor, and so we're going to drop it in and we're going to epoxy that in that fashion. Now the part that you will need in order to be able to do that is basically this threaded shaft. So if you're going to be doing this to some red guns, contact me and we'll sell you these threaded shafts for $3 a piece. Okay, next I'm going to show you that I'm going to put some epoxy in the hole, and then I'm going to seat my stud in there, and that will complete the modification of the red gun. Alright, now I'm going to use some epoxy, which I'm going to put a small amount of epoxy in the hole that we've had bored into the muzzle. And I'm using my epoxy mixer here, which has a mixing tube. So as I squeeze on the handle, I'm going to get a small amount of mixed epoxy going down in this hole. You have to be somewhat careful how much you put down there because there's not a lot of extra space in there. You certainly want enough in order to be able to get this secured in place. And so I put a small portion down in the hole. The next thing that I'm going to do is take my stud, which I've made sure that I've got enough clearance so that when I put this in here, I want this nut right here to bottom out against the muzzle of the gun here. Now as I put this down in here, because this is a fairly tight fit, I'll get some resistance and it won't want to allow me to go down very easy, so you kind of twist it, wiggle it around in order to displace the epoxy, and then you're going to push this on down, and you want this so that when it's all settled that the nut is also epoxied to the surface down here. Now in the event that you end up putting too much epoxy in there and it starts oozing out around the nut, I found, and this is what happened to me the first time, I found that if I just took a Q-tip, I could easily come around here and swab this off the excess epoxy that oozed out of the hole. And then it's just a matter of letting it sit like that until that epoxy sets up, and then you've got a good connection on which you'll be able to put your laser. I hope that helps.